Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to the YS channel as we start the year 2024 off with a bang. So I figured, in order to start off this year, we're going to just do a whole franchise retrospective. And for our first uploads for this year, we're going to do the Godzilla Franchise retrospective, starting with the original Godzilla movie, which is known or referred to as Gojira, and of course, in the American localized version, Godzilla King of the Monsters, which started off the Showa Era of the entire Godzilla franchise. We'll move on from the Showa Era to the Heisei Era to the Millennium Era and to the current era of the Godzilla franchise. Now with the current era, we may or may not touch upon the, the legendary studios productions. We'll see. But other than that, we're just gonna dive right into this entire retrospective. And before we get too much further, just please drop a like and a follow, or nothing else, just like the movie, or not the movie, the video. It helps our channel grow, and we greatly appreciate it as we look forward to bigger and better things in the year 2024. Alrighty, so we're just gonna dive straight into the first Godzilla movie, which starts off the whole Showa era. This is known as simply Godzilla. And then when it was released in America, it was given the title Godzilla King of the Monsters. The American version was released in 1956, and this is the origins of the Showa era of the Godzilla franchise and the origins of the franchise as a whole. And like with all great things that we all know and love, the franchise, the character Godzilla I'm referring to, and even the production of the movie, everything just underwent extensive revisions. The original pitch and the original idea was strayed very far away from what we see on the silver screen as the original incarnation of the Godzilla monster and the franchise as a whole. In fact, the project actually originally started off as a Japanese wartime movie. And I mean wartime, like World War II time frame. It was supposed to be a story between like a Japanese soldier stationed in Indonesia or South Eastern Pacific. He has a love interest, and due to like the political atmosphere of the time, and of course the fallout from the war, that didn't move forward. And then essentially, they're still pitching ideas to make this movie. A couple other ideas were pitched and basically fell through. And then one day, one of the, crew or, employees at Toho Studios pitched the idea of a monster movie. And of course, they're tossing around all, the wartime theme, so they're trying to think of a way to combine all the stuff together. And eventually, one thing leads to another, they create the Godzilla monster. But original ideas that were pitched was to make it more like a gorilla, or even some kind of random sea monster, more or less. One of the inspirations is the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which is the American movie. And of course, there was a real life incident, with the Bikini Atoll hydrogen bomb testing. Basically, there's a tuna fishing boat that got, caught in the radiation aftermath. The crew got radiated, it was a big deal. That just furthered, the thought process, we gotta make a movie with these themes. So they're like, what do we do here? And of course, the original producer of this whole project, I might get this name wrong, but it's Tomoyuki Tanaka. He's one of the heads not one of the heads, but he's one of the lead project dudes at Toho during the time. He's the one that pitched the original idea I was discussing about the soldier and his love interest. So it gets rejected. He watches 20,000, the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. All the other wartime stuff's coming through, and he starts creating multiple outlines. And then he pitches it to his higher up at Toho. And actually the project got greenlit at this point in development. But of course now with Project Greenlit, you gotta find a director. And of course, how would you say, the original person they wanted, for whatever reason, turned it down. And then it ends up in the hands of Ishiro Honda. Again, he was not the first choice, but he ended up, of course, it's hindsight, he ended up being the perfect choice for this. He put together a hell of a movie. So once they settled on Ichiro Honda as the movie director, then they finally got shellacking, and the whole project gets underway. So they were able to tie in all the themes of like nuclear fallout and the war, and of course they come up with the idea to use the Godzilla monster, as a metaphor for all those things. And some of, I guess, not impacts, but some aspects of the creature design were also inspired by radioactive fallout. It's like some of the scarring and all the stuff that they try to make present on the costume. And they're like, you know what, this movie could serve as a vehicle for denuclearization, which again, at the time, big arms race, Cold War between the U.S. Soviet Union. Japan's caught square right in the middle of all that, and they're the only country that's ever been bombed with nuclear weapons. So like, hey, we don't want to see any more of this. So let's make this movie a whole metaphor for why this is a bad idea. And voila, the original Godzilla movie comes together. Now, one of the cool things they did do while making this movie is they don't show the monster in its entirety right away. You only see bits and pieces of him or hints of him. And it's pretty much near the movie's climax, actually, when you see the whole Godzilla monster, like, in all its glory for the first time. And then, of course, he stomps on and destroys Tokyo and blah, blah, blah. The rest is history. Alright, so for interesting tidbits about the original Godzilla movie, again, how it all came together. Of course, during production, they still had to finalize the design of the creature, and they chose like a dinosaur type design. And then, of course, now that has to translate into a costume or a movie prop. And, I think they settled on, or not didn't settle, but they created two versions of the original Godzilla costume. And the reason being is like the suit was so damn heavy and hot and inflexible and uncomfortable that the actor who wore the suit, the guy could at the maximum be in there for like 3 minutes. And then the original suit guy, I might get this name wrong, but Haro Nakajima. He is the original guy in the Godzilla suit, and he would reprise this role for the entirety of, or almost the entirety of the Showa era. Starting with the original Godzilla and ending with the Terror of Mecha Godzilla. I'm sure he had backup here or there for certain scenes, but this guy would be the original. And again, for the entirety of or the majority of the Showa era. But anyway, so the suit was a health hazard. He would only be in there for a few minutes at a time, and he would pass out. They had to stop filming, resuscitate him, and it started over again. And then actually, the original name of the Godzilla monster is Gojira, not Godzilla. That just became how would you say, when they would translate this to English around the world, they'd all right, let's call it Godzilla. Maybe they thought it sounded like it, but either way, Gojira is the name that they settled for, and of course, around the world is known as Godzilla. And then, this movie was really revolutionary for, besides just its, I don't want to say its political themes, but it really set the tone and for suitmation or suit acting. It's been done before this movie came out, but this is pushed it to a whole different level here. And of course, with the other props and the miniatures that were used, which when you go back and watch this movie today, a lot of it holds up. Not all of it. They, like I said, they wrote, when they wrote this movie, they wrote everything and scripted it in about 3 weeks to a month. and then they get started working. But most of the miniatures are like 1 to 25 scale. And there's a couple of exceptions here or there. And then the movie just pioneered a lot of filmmaking techniques as a whole, which a lot of movies and even other Toho projects too would copy from and then improve upon moving forward. But I guess, just the filming, like creating these realistic, like looking miniatures of the cities, it really adds to the realism of the effect. Of the monster just stomping around and of course, I like the fact that it's made in black and white. It adds to the eeriness of the whole situation that's going on in the movie. And black and white to me hides some of the flaws. Again, but a criticism or nitpick, it's a movie made in the early 50s, and a lot of the effects just don't hold up in year 2023. But having it filmed in black and white really makes the original movie more effective, in my opinion here. But of course, with all that said, that's just stuff that they had to do on set. They were able to use actual stock footage from the World War II and in the aftermath of some other little disasters, like especially the scenes where you see all the, people in the hospital waiting for medical care. Most of that is stock footage. I mean, some of it's spliced here and there, but most of that is stock footage. And then, I'm sure they use some reels of the JASDF, military vehicles in action. But then, of course, with the close-ups of them fighting the monster, those are props. But they made a good use of just stock footage. Toho just had just lying around. But the crazy thing is, this movie took maybe 2 months to film, start to finish. And then, most amazingly, my opinion here, is its famous soundtrack, which you hear the Godzilla theme dun 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 dun. That's from Akira Ifukube. Again, I apologize if I got that wrong. Ifukube. The original soundtrack was composed in only 3 days. Think about how crazy that is. To compose a soundtrack or score a movie in only 3 days. And this guy did it, man. And because of his contributions, that soundtrack alone just lives in the annals of pop culture history. It's incredible. Now, not to spend too much time on just a single movie. After it's filmed and scored and all that stuff gets released, it becomes an international success. And then it led to a direct sequel. And of course, it stayed dormant for a few years, and then it led to further sequels. But the original Godzilla movie is by far the most important. It's valid, none of the rest would follow. But it really, as a movie, not just a monster movie, but as a movie, for those of you who haven't watched it, it has a great story. There's a love triangle between the doctor, some woman, and some other guy. I'm not trying to give away all the details, but the doctor guy, Shirazawa, he creates a weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer. And that's what they used to stop this version of Godzilla in the original movie. But it has a good. So believe it or not, the human drama is the driving point of the movie. It's a good story. And then you throw in the disaster that's unfolding with the rampage of the monster. And then, you get an instant classic. And it's, honestly, I know I don't sound all amped up for it, but this movie's a must-watch for for you movie buffs out there. You have to watch this movie. Even if you don't like giant monster movies, you have to, again, watch this movie. As I touched on before, So the love triangle involved a lady named Emiko Shirazawa, and a guy named Ogata. You know, they get all the reactions, drive the human drama, and you throw in some of the war stuff, and then all of a sudden you just drop Godzilla down and all of that. Chaos, man, just absolute chaos. You know, and I said it earlier, but I like the fact that this movie's made in black and white. No need to colorize it or whatever. Keep it black and white. It's perfect as it is. You know, yeah, it's just perfect for the themes and the backdrop and the terror that's coming. And even its sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, which, I'm not gonna really discuss too much during the Showa Era retrospective. The black and white works well too. To me, it makes the monsters look a little bit more menacing because you have another Godzilla monster that appears in that one, and it fights Anguirus, or the Ankylosaurus looking spiky monster that becomes Godzilla's frenemy pretty much in subsequent sequels. And other than that, again, same story. Well, not same story, but similar story unfolds. Japan's like, oh shit, we gotta stop this monster again. And then I would say in the sequel, the human drama really kind of weighs down the movie. I mean, it's still a good watch. My personal favorite sequence of the sequel is when they're fighting Godzilla, in the frozen tundra, and then they use the planes. Basically they try to get him trapped in ice. And the pilot sacrificing himself, and then Godzilla's trapped in ice for eternity until he thaws out and breaks out in Godzilla vs. King Kong. Alrighty, so simply just continuing where I left off from earlier with the original two Godzilla movies. I want to make a minor correction. So Godzilla Raids Again was not directed by Ishiro Honda. It was directed by Motoyoshi Oda. So I'll just get that out of the way. How Ishiro Honda would return for Godzilla vs. King Kong. King Kong vs. Godzilla. And he would direct the next 3 movies after that as well. Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and the invasion of the Astro Monster. So this is interesting. So this block of films kind of changes the tone of the entire franchise. Starting with King Kong vs. Godzilla. They're not as dark as the first 2 movies. I'm not saying because they're filmed in color, but the tone, it's still a serious tone, but it's not as eerie and dreadful as the first 2 movies where he was just literally forcing nature, walking atomic meltdown basically. And of course, King Kong vs. Godzilla. That's actually out of the whole series. It's my second favorite, only behind Godzilla vs. Mecha Godzilla. I love that. Growing up as a child, I loved it. And of course, the monster, battle action is pretty good in that one. Again, you gotta just take into account the limitations of the budget and the suits or whatever they were wearing, but overall, great movie. And if I remember correctly, I've read it somewhere on the Wikipedia page, probably on interviews out on the interwebs. Peter Jackson, the guy who directed the Lord of the Rings trilogy, actually, the scene in the King Kong vs. Godzilla, King Kong fights a giant octopus monster. He's told his people or his crew to refer to that scene for framing monster battles and whatever. So, that's a somewhat influential movie. And it's also infamous for the urban legend of having 2 endings, and one for the American audience, and then one for the Japanese audience. So depending which market you will watch it in, if you watch it in America, King Kong wins. Whereas if you watched it in Japan, Godzilla wins. That's been busted. So for anybody who hasn't seen the original one, the one that came out in 2020, King Kong wins. And then you get Mothra vs. Godzilla, which is similar in tone. But Mothra goes on to become one of the most, iconic of the Japanese kaiju, especially out of the Godzilla franchise. Mothra is a force of good usually, and then she's always accompanied by the little three fairies, or I'm sorry, not three, two fairies, which they're kind of like synonymous with the whole Godzilla franchise, and it's just some cool story and some cool lore. Mothra had proved to be so popular, she would get her own spin-off of the Godzilla and then get her like her own solo movies. And then of course, next two movies after that, Godzilla fights the three-headed monster known as Ghidorah, sometimes known as the Astro Monster, but either way, Ghidorah is supposed to be like the final boss of the Showa Era. And Ghidorah, has an amazing design for a kaiju. I don't care what anybody says. Very iconic. And then the tone of the franchise kind of starts to shift with the Ghidorah battle. Godzilla transitions from being like a evil villain to a force of good. And the movie starts to get more lighthearted after that. However, there's an infamous scene on the invasion of the Astro Monster where like they're on some other planet or asteroid, and Godzilla does like this retarded looking like victory dance thing. That's when like the whole tone of the franchise is just shifted. But it is what it is. And then after that, I call it the second half of the Showa Era. It gets incredibly lighthearted, starting with Ebra, Horror of the Deep, which was originally supposed to be a King Kong movie, and they just stuck Godzilla in there. And he fights a giant lobster with the assistance of Mothra. But the backpedal just a little bit here. And the Ghidorah battle, Rodan appears. So Rodan started off as his own solo. And then they're like, fuck it, we'll just stick him in a Godzilla movie, because we don't know what else to do with it. And then, it worked. And then, after that, you get Sudden Godzilla, which, the less said about that one, the better. And you get, his son known as Manila. And, yeah. And then after that one, you get Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, which, I actually have never seen that one all the way. Which, out of all these movies, it's the one I want to see the most, just because, again, I haven't seen it all the way. But basically, all the Godzilla villains, all the monsters appear in this movie in some shape or form. And then, basically, it turns out there's some kind of alien interference that's triggering all these monsters to go rampage and fucking fight each other. And then at the end of the movie, the aliens defeat it, and all the monsters go back to Monster Island. Yay. And this is followed by All Monsters Attack. So this one, I would say, for the Showa Era, is arguably the worst. Not to be, a Debbie Downer here. So this one, the story focuses like on a little boy with imagination who imagines he's taken to the Godzilla Island and has adventures with the Godzilla monster and his fucking son. And it's as goofy and lighthearted as it gets. Definitely, besides the Sudden Godzilla, this one's also like tied as the absolute worst of them. But fortunately, it gets a little bit better after. So they kind of try to change tone a little bit with Godzilla versus Ghidorah or Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, depending on what is localized here. And this one is supposed to have like an environmental, I guess, environmentalism theme to it. But, and I think it was supposed to have like a part 2, but it just didn't materialize. And And then this is followed by Godzilla versus Gigan. Now Gigan, of all the kaijus, has an interesting design. He has like these hook hands, and it's supposed to be like an alien monster with like a fucking like buzzsaw for his stomach. You know, and looks pretty cool. You know, but again, it's kind of a meh plot. And then this is followed by Godzilla vs. Megalon, which has one of the most infamous fucking scenes ever. Godzilla does the goddamn dropkick. You know, that like that meme or that thing you see, he does like the fucking flying dropkick. It's from that movie. And then it also has the robot human Ultraman ripoff known as Jaguar. You know, that again, the less said about that, you know, the better. And then I forget which movie, I think it was Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, where he uses his atomic breath to fucking fly. Yeah, it was Godzilla vs. Ghidorah uses this atomic breath. Fucking hokey and stupid. So the Showa Era is a mix of really cool stuff and some really just hokey, stupid shit. But it is bookended with the Godzilla vs. Mecha Godzilla and Terror of Mecha Godzilla fights, which Mecha Godzilla is obviously, besides Ghidorah and Mothra, the most iconic Godzilla villain. Well, Mothra's not a villain, but you know, kind of antagonist to Godzilla. But Mecha Godzilla is definitely the, as we would say, the most iconic of the rest of the lot. And then you get a cool battle. There's also another like monster, looks like the Japanese guardian dog called King Caesar. You know, so there's some good fights in that. Alright, so just to wrap up the Showa Era retrospective. Excuse me. So, again, the Showa Era starts off, I would say, starts off strong with the original Godzilla movie. And then all the Godzilla versus movies, you know, starting with King Kong, Mothra, you know, and then Ghidorah. You know, so like the front half, pretty amazing, especially for kaiju movies. Back half gets incredibly like lighthearted in tone, and it's kind of like some of it's you got some cool stuff, but mixed bag. Just to be kind and be fair about it. And then basically you see Godzilla, the transformation. You know, some of like the physical changes were just made just out of necessity for like the costume and whatever. And as Godzilla became more of a lighthearted, like anthropomorphic, you know, protagonist. His design, I would say, he gets a little bit goofier looking. You know, he goes from looking like a terror of the deep to like a fucking cookie monster, you know, in fucking lizard skin. And then kind of like when the Showa Era comes to a conclusion, you know, you get a slightly more menacing or mature looking suit. But overall, it's fun and it's lighthearted. And you know, unfortunately for the franchise, with the second half, especially with the change of the tone, the box office did like begin to drop off drastically. So eventually, and after the release of the Terror of Mecha Godzilla in 1975, the franchise went on nearly a 10-year break, and they rebooted with the Return of Godzilla, otherwise known as Godzilla 1984 or Godzilla 1985 in America, and that would become the birth of the Heisei Era.
sprinkling the sky.